The invisible one. You never forget the feeling of being invisible. Not because no one sees you, but because they only see what you can do for them. My name is Rachel Moore, and for most of my life, that's exactly who I was, the girl who cleaned up, stayed quiet, and carried everyone else's weight. In my family, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was the maid. The house that wasn't a home. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, one of those places where families were supposed to stick together, where Sunday dinners meant laughter and love. But in my house, Sunday dinners meant dishes. My older sister, Lena, was the golden child, beautiful, confident, always performing for our parents. My younger brother, Evan, was the baby, protected, spoiled, forgiven before he even finished doing something wrong. And me? I was somewhere in the middle, useful, quiet, invisible. If the house needed cleaning, it was my job. If dinner needed cooking, it was, Rachel's good at that. When the sink broke or the laundry piled up, my mother would sigh. Rachel, can you handle it? You're always so dependable. Dependable. That word became my identity, a compliment that felt like a cage. Even in my teenage years, I'd stay home while Lena went to parties and Evan played sports. My father would glance at me scrubbing the counters and say, "You've got such a good work ethic. You'll make a great helper someday." A helper. Not a dreamer. Not a leader. Just a helper. If you've ever been taken for granted by the people you love, hit subscribe. Because one day, your quiet strength will speak louder than their silence. Graduation day. When I graduated high school, I expected at least a small celebration. Lena had gotten a car when she finished. Evan got a family dinner. Me? Mom told me to bake my own cake. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, mixing flour and sugar, while my parents laughed in the living room with my siblings. They didn't even notice when I brought the cake out, still warm, still mine. That night, I made a promise to myself. If no one was going to celebrate me, I'd learn to celebrate myself. It took everything in me to say it out loud. One day, I'll leave this house, and when I do, they'll remember my name. The first step out. College wasn't an option my parents supported. Lena was already in business school, paid for, of course. When I mentioned wanting to go, Dad just shook his head. "You're not like your sister, Rachel. You're better with practical things. You should find something steady, maybe housekeeping or retail. Something steady. Something small." So I packed what little I had, 2 duffel bags and a heart full of determination, and left for the city. I found work as a cleaner in a hotel downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time, I was earning my own money, making my own choices. Every day, I'd clean the rooms of people who looked like they had it all, businessmen, travelers, newlyweds. And every day, I'd think, if they can have that life, why can't I? The turning point. One evening, while I was cleaning a suite, the guest, a woman in her 40s, walked in unexpectedly. She was elegant, composed, confident. But instead of getting angry at me for being there, she smiled. "You have a good eye for detail," she said, noticing how I'd perfectly folded the towels. "Do you enjoy this kind of work?" I hesitated. "I'm grateful for it, but I want more. I just don't know where to start." She nodded thoughtfully. "Start where you are. You'd be surprised how far consistency can take you." I began as a hotel clerk. Now I own 3. Her name was Valerie Grant, and that 5-minute conversation changed my life. Before she left, she handed me her card. "Call me sometime," she said. "Ambition deserves guidance. You never know who's watching while you're doing your best in silence. Sometimes, the right person sees your worth long before your family ever does." Learning to build. I called Valerie a week later. To my surprise, she remembered me immediately. She invited me to coffee, not as a worker, but as a potential mentee. Over the next 2 years, she taught me everything about business, management, communication, and leadership. She saw potential in me that no one else ever had. When I got promoted to front desk supervisor, my parents didn't say a word. When I became assistant manager, Mom said, "That's nice, dear. Don't forget to visit when you can." But I didn't visit often. Because every time I did, they treated me the same, asking me to cook, clean, fix things. I was 27, and still the maid. So I stopped going. The breakthrough. By 30, I was running my own cleaning company, Radiant Spaces. I started small, with just 3 employees and a dream. We cleaned offices, homes, restaurants, but I promised myself one thing. No one who worked for me would ever feel unseen. Within 5 years, my business grew beyond anything I'd imagined. Valerie invested in me. We opened branches in 3 cities. And then, one morning, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I hadn't heard her voice in almost a year. She sounded hesitant. "Rachel, your father's business is in trouble. He might lose the house." I was silent for a long time. The house. The same house where I'd scrubbed floors and washed dishes. The same house where no one had said thank you. "I'll come by," I said finally. "Let's talk." Before I tell you what happened when I walked back into that house, make sure you're subscribed. Because sometimes, the real power isn't in revenge, it's in how you rise above it. The return of the maid. It had been 7 years since I left that house, 7 years since I'd last been the girl who washed dishes no one thanked her for. Now I was 32, the CEO of a company with 150 employees, and yet, as my car turned down that familiar street, my hands trembled on the wheel. Funny how success can rebuild everything except your childhood scars. The house that time forgot. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was fading, the yard was overgrown, and the porch light, the one that used to flicker when I came home late, was still broken. I stepped out of my car, heels clicking on the cracked pavement. Through the window, I saw my father sitting at the table, head in his hands. When he looked up and saw me, his expression froze. "Rachel," he said, voice caught somewhere between surprise and shame. "Hi, Dad." He stood awkwardly, as though he wasn't sure whether to hug me or apologize. He settled for neither. "Your mother's inside. She'll be glad you came." Would she? The kitchen. The smell hit me first, the familiar mix of detergent and lemon polish. It was the same scent I used to scrub into those floors for hours. Mom turned when she heard my footsteps. Her eyes widened, softening as she wiped her hands on a towel. "Rachel." Her voice was trembling. Not with joy, with guilt. "You look," she searched for the word. "Different." "Successful?" I said, half smiling. She tried to laugh, but it came out strained. "Your father's having some trouble with the shop." We didn't know who else to call. I looked around. The same furniture. The same curtains. But the energy was different, heavy, uncertain. "You could have called years ago," I said quietly. "For anything else." She sighed. "I know. We should have treated you better." It wasn't the apology I needed, but it was a start. Before I tell you what I decided that day, take a second to subscribe. Because sometimes, the most powerful moment isn't revenge, it's the silence after they finally admit they were wrong. The offer. Dad explained the situation over coffee. The family hardware store had been struggling for years. Lena had moved away after getting married. Evan was between jobs. The business that had supported our family for 3 decades was now months from bankruptcy. "We're not asking for charity," Dad said, voice low. "Just a loan. I'll pay it back when things pick up." I stirred my coffee slowly. "You don't need a loan," I said. "You need a plan." He blinked. "A plan?" "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "And I'll help you make one, as your consultant." Mom frowned. "Consultant? I run a company, Mom. I don't give away money, I invest it. If I help, we'll do it properly. Dad swallowed hard. You mean you'd work with us? No, I corrected gently. You'll work for me. The silence that followed was sharp. Evan, who had just walked in, nearly dropped his phone. Wait, you're serious? Completely, I said. If I'm going to rebuild this place, I'll do it right. No shortcuts, no favoritism. Their faces said it all, pride fighting with shame. But I wasn't here to humiliate them. I was here to help them stand, the same way I'd once wished they'd helped me. The first day. A week later, I showed up to the shop with my assistant, Jordan, and a full restructuring plan. I wore a crisp navy suit, not to intimidate, but to remind myself I'd earned this. Dad and Evan were waiting. Their nervous smiles almost broke me. Good morning, I said, professional and calm. From now on, we'll run this place like a real business. I divided responsibilities, Dad handling inventory, Evan managing deliveries, Mom overseeing records. They were shocked at how strict I was. But by week's end, sales were up 20%. And for the first time, Dad said it without hesitation. You're good at this, Rachel. Better than I ever was. That night, when I locked up the store, I cried, not out of sadness, but release. Because that simple sentence was all I'd ever wanted to hear. The tables had turned, but not the way I imagined. I wasn't here to make them pay. I was here to show them what it looks like when the maid becomes the master of her own story. The shift. Weeks turned into months. The business slowly came back to life. Customers returned, inventory stabilized, and even Evan began showing up on time. And something else shifted too, the way my parents looked at me. Not as the quiet girl who scrubbed floors, but as someone who had built an empire from the ground up. One afternoon, Mom brought me lunch at the office, a simple sandwich and iced tea. You used to make this for us, she said softly. Now I wanted to make it for you. I smiled, taking the plate. Thank you, Mom. That means more than you think. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry it took us this long to see you. That moment, quiet, trembling, human, was worth more than any victory speech. If you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who underestimated you, subscribe. Because one day, your strength will humble the very voices that tried to silence you. The family dinner. 3 months later, the business was thriving again. To celebrate, I invited my family to dinner at my home, a spacious, sunlit house with a long dining table and walls lined with framed awards. As they sat down, I saw the same awe in their faces that I once had looking at others' success. But this time, it was mine. During dessert, Dad raised his glass. To Rachel, he said, voice trembling. The best boss and daughter we could ask for. I smiled. To family, I replied. The one we rebuild, one honest moment at a time. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child, belonging. Not because I earned it, but because I finally believed I deserved it. I was the maid in my own family. The one who cleaned their messes, carried their weight, and asked for nothing in return. But life has a funny way of rewarding quiet strength. I didn't rise to destroy them, I rose to heal myself. And in doing so, I taught them that power isn't about control. It's about grace. Sometimes, forgiveness is the loudest victory. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and share it with someone who's still fighting to be seen. Because one day, the people who called you ordinary will call you boss. When the boss has to choose. Success has a way of changing the scenery without always changing the weather inside you. For months, everything hummed along, Radiant Spaces was thriving, the hardware store was back on solid ground, and my family had learned to show up differently. I'd built systems, hired managers, and even started a small scholarship for young women who wanted to start businesses. Life felt steady. And then, quietly, the old gravity reasserted itself. The slow creep. At first it was tiny things, Dad asking me to approve an extra shipment, just this once, Mom leaving tasks for me, because you're so good at this stuff, Evan calling to say he couldn't cover payroll for his small side job and could I help. The language was always polite, anxious, framed as emergencies, but the thread was familiar. It tugged at some soft place inside me that still reflexively fixed things. I noticed I was answering more calls. I was staying later at the hardware store to sign invoices and track down suppliers. I found myself rescheduling client meetings. I'd catch my reflection in the shop window and see the old girl who used to slip into service whenever the family needed a cushion. One evening, after a 16-hour day splitting my time between contract work and the family ledger, I sat alone at my kitchen island and felt the familiar squeeze of resentment and responsibility. I'd promised productivity and peace in my life. I'd also promised my parents compassion. Now I had to choose which promise to keep. If you're juggling compassion and your own limits, subscribe. This next part is for people who learn the hard lesson that giving without structure becomes taking without consent. The request. The tipping point came when Evan called with real panic in his voice. "Ratch, the delivery truck broke down. We have orders due tomorrow. If we don't get them out, suppliers will pull their accounts." He was breathless, helpless. I could hear the weight of expectation in every syllable. He hadn't asked for advice, he asked for money and action. He wanted me to sign for a loan, arrange a tow, and cover emergency payroll. I put the phone down and looked at my calendar. I had a board meeting the next morning for a major new client. I had a team depending on me. But I also remembered nights I'd spent in that very house, smoothing tempers and buying bread with my pocket change so the family wouldn't fight. My first instinct, the one bred into me by years of being the fixer, was to say yes. To swoop in, save the day, and wake the next morning as if nothing had shifted. I could feel the old adrenaline, the tiny high of being indispensable. Then I remembered something my mentor Valerie had told me years ago when I was first tempted to bail her out of a bad business decision: help people learn to solve their own problems. Rescue once and you become their safety net forever. So I took a breath. "Evan," I said slowly, "I'll help, but not by doing it for you. I'll come down tonight and we'll make a plan. You'll call the towing company and arrange quotes. I'll help with the paperwork, but you sign the loan. I want you to learn how to own this." He was silent for a beat, then said, "Okay. Thank you." That "okay" was the first small victory, for him and for me. The work night. That evening, I left the office, drove to the hardware store, and sat at the counter with Evan for almost 3 hours. We called tow companies, compared quotes, called the bank to discuss a short-term line, and reworked delivery schedules. I showed him how to read the P&L in real time. We updated inventory procedures so future breakdowns could be avoided. It was exhausting. It was exasperating. It was also exactly the kind of work I wanted to do, empowering someone to be competent instead of dependent. When the tow company finally confirmed, Evan leaned back, relief flooding his face. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Ratch," he said, vulnerable and honest. My throat tightened. The impulse to be flattered rose, but I knew a different truth. I wanted him to say, "I did this, with your help." So I nudged him. "You did do this," I said. "You made the calls and you signed. I just helped you stand up." He smiled, and in that smile I recognized something precious, a shift from expecting to receive to being willing to learn. When compassion is tested. A week later, a supplier called. An order had been delayed because someone in the office had failed to place it on time. My mother's note on the ledger, "Rachel, please check," was still there. I could have handled it in 20 minutes, called the supplier, sorted logistics. Instead I forwarded the message to Evan with clear instructions and a deadline. A small rebellion of the heart, perhaps, a tiny demonstration that I'd not revert to old ways. Evan called me, annoyed at first, then sheepish. He'd done it, and he'd learned to handle that piece of the business. When I congratulated him, he spit back, unexpectedly, "You're hard." The lash stung. I knew it wasn't cruelty, it was discomfort at being moved out of comfort. And yet, over the next months, the stranglehold my family had on my time loosened. They called for advice, not rescue. They showed up for trainings I held for them, workshops on bookkeeping and inventory management. Mom started handling basic vendor calls and took a pride in ticking checkboxes the first time she reconciled receipts. I realized then what real leadership felt like, not doing everything, but teaching others to do it well. The work was slower, more deliberate, and sometimes lonelier. But the satisfaction was deeper. You can be generous and still have standards. The true kindness is teaching someone to stand, not building them a chair they'll never use. The pressure returns. Of course, growth is never linear. Old habits and new crises collided. A big client made a late, impossible request that threatened to derail our quarterly goals. Evan's delivery van was in another accident. Mom had a health scare unrelated to the earlier hip but serious enough to warrant hospital tests. The calendar filled again with crises, and the temptation to sprint back into the fixer role rose like a tide. I called an emergency meeting with my executive team and outlined a plan: temporary delegation, prioritized tasks, and an explicit no after-hours policy unless in true emergencies. I told them what was happening and asked for trust. They rallied. I slept less for a week, then began delegating more. I refused to let the familiar chaos become my default. When Mom called late one night asking me to come in, I paused. I thought of my mother's earlier admission of regret, the way she'd held herself differently. I thought of the house where I'd once been the default maid, and of the independent woman I'd built. I took a breath and told my mother I couldn't come, not because I didn't care, but because I'd set up a plan with a neighbor to check on her and because I was already burning a candle at both ends. Her disappointment was sharp. She said my name like it used to be a reprimand. I felt that old ache. But I also felt something else, the quiet conviction that boundaries could be enforced without coldness. I called the neighbor to confirm. I texted Mom the schedule and promised a video call in the morning. That small act, structure instead of heroism, calmed both of us. Later she admitted, sheepishly, that it felt different, less panicked. She said she'd slept better than she had in weeks. The lesson that sticks. Months passed. Evan's business stabilized, Mom's health tests were reassuring, Dad began to call me not as a default manager but to share small triumphs. Our family rhythm was changing, slow, imperfect, but real. One afternoon, Evan surprised me by booking me a quiet lunch. He slid a small envelope across the table. "Open it," he said. Inside was a certificate, a printed copy, obviously homemade, with my name at the top, best boss and sister. He decorated it with stickers. I laughed until I cried. "Why this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Because you didn't just save the store. You taught us how to do better. You made us feel like we could handle things. I'm grateful." Grateful. It was a word more powerful than any money or success could be. I folded the certificate and put it in my purse, feeling the slow warmth of accomplishment that came from changing a system, not just offering a quick fix. If you're learning to give with boundaries, not to rescue but to teach, subscribe. These stories are for people who want to be kind without losing themselves. Quiet choices. The tests kept coming, they always would. But I'd learned how to respond with both firmness and mercy. I'd learned how to show up in the ways that mattered without being consumed by the need to prove my value through endless labor. I wasn't perfect, sometimes I snapped, sometimes I let guilt push me, but I returned to the structure I'd built because it worked. And in the quiet spaces in between emergencies, I found myself doing what I'd always wanted, mentoring other women, expanding Radiant Spaces into a social enterprise that trains single mothers for jobs in hospitality, and writing a simple guide called, How to Stop Being the Household Default. People told me I'd forgiven too easily. Others accused me of using my success to control my family. But the truth was simpler, forgiveness felt like the only way to be free. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing not to be defined by it. The peaceful forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't always arrive like a movie scene, dramatic, perfect, scripted. Often it shows up in small, stubborn ways: a prepared meal left on a doorstep, a message that says I tried, a quiet habit that replaces an old hurt. For me, forgiveness arrived as a modest ribbon cutting. A new beginning for old places. A year after I took over the hardware store operations, we opened a small training wing at the back of Radiant Space's main office. The idea had started as a scribble on a napkin during a late-night conversation with Valerie. What if we trained people the way I'd been trained? What if the Maid work that once kept me invisible became the first step to visible independence for others? The program focused on practical skills: bookkeeping, inventory, customer service, and leadership basics. It targeted single parents, recent immigrants, and young people from neighborhoods with few job prospects. Mom volunteered to run the hospitality segment. Dad agreed to teach practical repair skills. Evan managed logistics. They wanted to help, and this time, they weren't being asked to rescue. They were being asked to teach. On opening day, the whole town came. There were speeches, ribbon scissors, and the sort of small-town pride that smells like coffee and fresh paint. When I cut the ribbon, I looked around at faces I'd once scrubbed dishes next to: neighbors, former co-workers, folks who had seen me as nothing more than a quiet helper. Their applause felt different this time. It wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. I caught my mother's eye in the crowd. She was clapping and smiling, tentative, bright. Later, she came up to me with a ribbon stuck to the hem of her dress and said, simply, "You were always more than we ever believed." Her words made my throat tight, not because they absolved everything, but because they held a willingness to change. That willingness was the seed of everything that came after. If you're here because you believe people can change, and because you believe compassion can be firm, subscribe. This story is about building something kinder and stronger in the space where hurt once lived. The quiet apology. One afternoon, Dad found an old photo album while helping at the training wing. He flipped through pages of holiday dinners, award nights, and lazy summers. He paused on a photo of me, younger, arms dusted with flour from the cake I'd baked for graduation. He called me into the office and handed me the photo without comment. I took it and felt the years folded into paper and ink. He inhaled and then said, very quietly, "I'm sorry, Rachel. For the times we asked and didn't ask, for the moments we assumed, for the work that went unseen. I thought I was doing right by protecting my children, but I protected the wrong things." The apology wasn't theatrical. It didn't require grand gestures. It was simple, true, and adult, the kind of apology that leaves room for a different future rather than rewriting the past. I put the photo in my desk and, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel the urge to prove myself. I felt the urge to be generous. The test of compassion. Years of steady progress don't mean there aren't tests. A small supplier scandal hit the town, a company that had been cutting corners, and our clients were suddenly wary. The bank called for a review, and some of the training wing's initial funding was put on hold. The pressure returned, and with it the old instinct in my family to panic and point fingers. When tensions flared, my father froze and my mother retreated into a defensive quiet. Evan began to snap at the team. For a moment, it felt like the same old pattern: crisis, blame, someone expected to fix it all. I felt the old reflex stir: do it yourself, carry the shame, fix the mess. But I'd learned another way. I gathered the team and my family in the back room, the same place where we'd cut the ribbon, and said, "We'll get through this. But we do it together, and we do it with transparency. No blame. No secrecy." We worked late for a week, calling clients, securing alternative suppliers, adjusting services. Dad handled repair pickups, Mom coordinated meals for volunteers, Evan created a new delivery schedule that reduced costs. They all worked side by side with our trainees. In the process, they met the people they were helping: mothers who'd left abusive relationships, men trying to rebuild after addiction, young people who wanted a chance. Seeing my parents hand a certificate to a trainee who just finished the hospitality module, I watched pride change shape from embarrassment into purpose. It was the kind of healing that didn't erase wrongs but rerouted energy. Forgiveness as a practice. Forgiveness, I discovered, was less dramatic than the movies make it seem. It's a daily practice. Some days we slipped. Some days the old lines resurfaced. But more often, we learn to pause and ask, is this helpful? Is this true? Is this how we want to be? One evening, over a simple meal after a long day of workshops, Mom said something that surprised me. She'd been watching a trainee, a quiet woman who reminded her, oddly, of me at 19. I used to think helping was doing everything, she said. Now I see it can be teaching, too. I didn't know how to do that before. I'm trying. That sentence, the humble admission of not knowing, was as much forgiveness as any formal apology. It opened the door to real repair. If you're learning to turn past pain into present purpose, don't forget to subscribe. Stories like these remind us that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing a better way forward. The closing ceremony. 1 year after the training wing opened, we hosted a celebration, not for me, but for the first cohort who'd graduated and found stable jobs. They had a tiny banquet in the renovated back room. My parents and Evan were there, serving food, greeting guests, smiling like hosts who'd finally found the courage to be seen. After the ceremony, the mayor approached me and asked if we'd consider scaling the program countywide. It was an unexpected honor, and I thought of Valerie and the woman who'd given me a business card years before. I thought about that teenager kneading cake batter in the kitchen while a family laughed in the living room. I sat down next to my mother and took her hand. She leaned toward me and whispered, "You saved us from our old ways." I looked at her, at Dad, at Evan, at the people who'd once asked me to clean up their messes, and I felt a fierce tenderness. I felt like I was standing on a bridge between what had been and what could be. The legacy. A few years later, Radiant Spaces was not just a business, it was a community anchor. We'd placed dozens of trainees into steady jobs. We'd helped the hardware store rise again as a modern, community-focused shop. My parents had become local mentors, sharing the story of how they'd learned to listen. Sometimes, strangers approached me on the street and said, sincerely, "Your mother told me how she used to be, and how she changed." Each time, I felt a small, private joy. Not because I needed credit, but because their change had ripple effects. The quietest part of my legacy, though, was personal. At night, Dad would call me to ask for advice on small business things, then say, with a laugh, "You know, I still can't fold a fitted sheet." We'd both laugh. The tenderness in that exchange felt like the seal on a long, patient repair. If this story reminds you that people can learn, slowly, imperfectly, subscribe. We share stories about the power of steady change, forgiveness, and the long work of becoming kinder. Quiet power of being seen. I was the maid in my own family. I dusted shelves, scrubbed sinks, and made space for other people's lives. I learned to be invisible and became very good at vanishing. But then I learned that being seen is a responsibility, to others and to yourself. I became a boss not to prove them wrong, but to prove something truer, that the work that once kept me invisible could be the work that made people visible. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It taught us how to live differently in the present. My family didn't change overnight. They changed step by step, often clumsily, always honestly. The maid in me taught my family how to stand. The boss in me taught them how to walk. And in that walking, we discovered something we'd been missing for years, a version of home that included respect, gratitude, and the quiet art of repairing what was broken. Years on, when I go back to that kitchen where I once mixed my own graduation cake, I sometimes bake another one. Not because anyone expects it, but because rituals can be gentle teachers. My mother helps set the table now without asking me first. My father offers to help clean up. Evan jokes about hiring me as his chief consultant for life. We still have hard days. We still stumble. But we laugh more than we used to, and the laughter holds us steady. If you're carrying the weight of being the family default, the one who always fixes, always folds, always forgives, remember this: your work matters. But your life matters more. Build a bridge, not a burden. Teach where you can. Forgive when you're ready. Lead with kindness, and keep your boundaries. They will keep you whole.